On Christmas Day 2018, my girlfriend and I took a trip to her parents' house. This was my first time meeting her family, and I was excited to meet them. Christmas is by far my favorite holiday, and I love the Christmas spirit. After spending 3 or 4 hours there, though, I was definitely getting anxious to leave. My social battery had been about completely drained. Sometimes it takes a lot out of me being around new people, especially if it's for a long period of time. I don't know why I'm like that, but I've been this way ever since I was just a small child. It's not that I don't like people or enjoy their company, I'm just a person that likes to keep to themselves, or maybe I should say I have a very select few amount of people that I love and interact with daily. I just wasn't used to being around so many new people and getting all of this attention. Right before we were about to leave, we quickly realized that over the 4 or 5 hours we spent there, we got lots of snow. I knew it was snowing, but I didn't think we were going to be hit with as much snow as we got hit with. There was easily an additional 3 to 5 inches of snow that was piled on top of the roads that were already in bad enough condition beforehand. My girlfriend and I lived just over an hour away from her parents' house, so with the roads being as dangerous as they were, we got settled in, and we pretty much had no other choice than to crash there for the night. The snow had no plans on slowing down anytime soon, and there was no way we were going to drive under those horrible conditions. My girlfriend seemed quite happy about staying the night, but me, on the other hand, I wasn't so psyched about it. I wasn't going to complain though. I was just happy I was under a safe and warm roof with my girlfriend. Plus I got to spend some more time with her family, and I really got to know her dad some more. We bonded over similar interests that we both had, like hunting and basketball, which I thought was pretty cool. Her parents were very nice and welcoming to me, and they prepared a great meal for myself and everyone else, which I was thankful for. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad after all. I couldn't have been more wrong to think that, though. It was getting late, and everybody was venturing off to bed. My girlfriend Grace got us some blankets, and we went to the spare bedroom that we were staying in for the night. We turned on a random horror movie, and she fell asleep less than halfway through the movie. I, on the other hand, wasn't tired at all. All of a sudden, I heard this weird noise that sounded like it came from outside. It almost sounded like smaller-sized tree branches were dragging across the bedroom window. I really didn't think a whole lot about it at first, but it definitely caught me off guard and raised my suspicion. I almost got up out of bed to try and take a look outside, but Grace was lying in my arms and I didn't want to wake her up for nothing. I think I just assumed that I was overthinking. A bit of time passed by and I was finally getting sleepy, but I really had to use the bathroom. I got up out of bed slowly and quietly as possible to ensure I didn't wake Grace up, and I did my business in the bathroom, and I lied back down in bed after. As I was drifting asleep, I heard this disturbing-like scream come from outside. It was loud enough to wake me up and startle me, but not enough to wake Grace up. I got up and I looked out the window, and I kid you not, I could see a person that was standing in the middle of the backyard looking at me. I wasn't so sure they could see me, but I didn't weigh it out as an option. I didn't really care anyways if they could see me or not, to tell the truth. My gut told me something was terribly wrong though. You know when you get that gut feeling of dread? It's an unexplainable feeling, but that's how I felt. I tried to wake my girlfriend up, but she's a heavy sleeper, so after a few attempts, I gave up. Stupidly enough, I ran outside by myself to go and see what the hell was happening. And the person I saw only a few minutes ago was gone. They were completely out of sight. I then spotted the footsteps in the snow that looked like it led all the way to the shed in the backyard. I followed them cautiously, but quickly at the same time. Then I heard the scratching sound as I was approaching the shed. It almost sounded like the way a knife sounds when scraped against metal. But even so, I continued moving forward. As I got up closer to the front door of the shed, I noticed that it was cracked open. I opened it some more and peeked my head through ever so slowly, with my heart practically beating out of my chest now. And that's when I saw the most disturbing thing I will ever see in my entire life. That same man from earlier was standing right there, no more than 10 feet away from me. He had a sledgehammer in his hand and was approaching me now. I stood there in shock for probably a few seconds, but I screamed for help as loud as I could immediately. started to run back to the house and he began chasing me. When I turned around though, right before I got to the front door, he was out of sight. Almost like he vanished out of thin air. I didn't question it much, I was just ready to get the hell inside to safety. I ran upstairs in a panic to Grace and I told her what happened. She started freaking out when I told her, even more than I was, and we woke her family up and told them as well about what happened. Thankfully they have cameras up surrounding the perimeter of the house, so Grace's dad played back the footage so they could see what we were talking about. Unfortunately, I didn't pick up the man's facial features at all, and it wasn't any help in identifying the man. I barely got a good look at him either. All I can really say is that he was average height, and that he had medium-length black curly hair, and was creepy as fuck. For some reason, her parents didn't want me to call the police though, and I think they tried to convince me that it was some sort of prank and that we shouldn't be worried about it. I don't know how the hell they could believe that, but I thought that was pretty weird. Something about that didn't seem right to me. You would think that if someone was on your property with a weapon and they chased your daughter's boyfriend in the middle of the night, that something would probably kick in inside of you, that was definitely way more than just a silly prank. The guy was going to fucking kill me for Christ's sakes. I skipped out on going to Grace's parents' house every Christmas since. And I've been running out of excuses, but I really don't care to go back. This happened on Christmas Eve when I was 23 years old, 3 years ago. I lived alone in a house that I was renting at the time. I had been spending time with some family all afternoon, and I didn't end up making it home until later into the evening. I was really tired because my sleep schedule was all out of whack, and I remember I had a particularly stressful work week the previous week, so I was just ready to go to bed. Usually I shower when I get home and hop in bed afterwards and turn some Netflix on or YouTube, but not today. I was so beat that I went straight to sleep after checking my phone for a few minutes. I had to wake up early for Christmas morning anyways. I think I fell asleep just after 8 o'clock. It couldn't have been more than a few hours that I awoke to footsteps that were coming from upstairs. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, my bedroom was downstairs in the basement. I'm a really light sleeper, so I woke up fairly quick, I think. I woke up in a panicked state, and immediately I realized someone had just broken into my house. The first thing I thought to do was call the police, but my phone wasn't picking up any service. I get horrible service sometimes in my basement, and this was one of those times. I rushed over to the laundry room that was also downstairs and only a room away, and I grabbed about a foot-long steel pipe that I could use as a self-defense weapon. Of course, I didn't want it to come to that, but I had to be ready. I hid behind some clothes I had hanging up in the laundry room, and it wasn't that great of a hiding spot, honestly, but it was the only place I could come up with to hide. I must have called the police a dozen times, and each time it would ring only once and it would make this beeping noise my phone would make when it had no signal. I was starting to get pretty pissed off, and I let my anger get a hold of me. The noise upstairs continued, and by now it had escalated to more than just footsteps. I kept hearing this noise that sounded like someone was pounding on something. Then everything got eerily quiet for only a couple of minutes. Whoever broke into my house was now trying to make their way downstairs. I must have locked the door though, because whoever it was wasn't able to get the door open. I have a bad habit of making sure that the doors are always locked. I'm not so sure how bad of a habit it is though, considering it potentially saved my life. The man started yelling and screaming, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. It didn't even sound like he was speaking English. He then knocked on the door, and then he attempted to break it down by what sounded like him kicking it over and over. Luckily, he wasn't able to get the door open. I pretty much sat there and waited for the nightmare to be over with. I waited until I felt like he was gone before I even thought about walking upstairs. I probably waited for over a half hour, after the last sound I heard from upstairs. I finally worked up the courage to walk up the stairs and look around the house for him. I was just waiting for him to pop out at any moment and I would have had to fight for my life. But he never did. He was gone. The only thing he left behind was a piece of paper that he taped to the fridge that said, and I quote, "I'll be back," with a bunch of smiley faces on it. I didn't care too much for his little threat and I called the police to make a report on what happened. I had absolutely nothing on the man though. I didn't know what he looked like at all, and I had no idea of his age or anything that could even give the slightest detail of the man. So obviously, there wasn't much the police could do except reassure me and boost my confidence by telling me that everything would be okay and that they will catch him sooner or later. It really freaked me out too, because even still to this day, I have no idea how he got inside. There were no signs of a break-in or anything. I had an incident that happened exactly a year later on Christmas Eve as well. I wasn't home, I was actually at my girlfriend's house visiting with her family when I received a notification on my phone on my Ring doorbell app that said somebody was at my front door. I opened up the notification right away and there was a man on my front porch trying to get my attention or break into my house or something. I know deep down in my heart that it had to have been the same guy that broke into my house the year before. He had this huge creepy smile on his face, but he seemed to have been confused by the Ring camera I had, like he hadn't seen one before or something. I then yelled at him and told him the police were on the way and that if he doesn't leave he's going to be arrested and to never come back again. Well, surprisingly it worked when I threatened him because he ran off and I haven't heard or seen anything from him since. I called the police and I was able to give them a description finally, but still, since the man was gone by the time the police arrived, there wasn't much they could do. Now every year around Christmas especially, I get paranoid that he's going to come back. I'm set to move in about 3 months though, so hopefully I can finally start feeling safe in my own home. Last year on Christmas Eve, I was sitting in my living room on the couch, enjoying my free time alone. My 2 boys, who were only 5 and 8 years old at the time, were already in bed, and my wife was already sleeping peacefully as well. I had a couple hours to myself to do whatever I wanted, so I turned a random Christmas movie on that I found on TV and I let it play in the background. I turned our Christmas tree lights on and I made myself some hot chocolate to really help set the atmosphere of a cozy Christmas Eve night. I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to the movie, I was mostly just playing games on my phone and scrolling through Facebook. I just remember feeling very content and relaxed. It was the perfect night. I had the fireplace going and I had leftovers from last night's dinner and the next day was Christmas. I didn't think that life could get any better than that. Unexpectedly and completely out of nowhere, I heard a thud sound that came from the other side of the house. It scared me at first, but I figured it was nothing. But then I heard it again. I then looked outside through the front living room window and the kitchen window that was above the sink and all around the house. I peeked my head through my kids' bedroom, they share a room might I add, just to see if anything was going on that I should know about. They were both sound asleep. I checked my wife and I's room as well, but she also seemed to be sleeping. What the hell was that noise? I heard the noise like 3 or 4 separate times, and each time it sounded like someone was pounding on something with their fist. I took a step outside in my slippers to have a look around the house, but there was nobody. Maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me, I thought. I decided to let it go and head back inside. I was now walking back to our patio, and just as I made it inside and was about to lock the sliding glass door, I heard a scream. It sounded like a kid. Right away, I knew it was Luke, who was my youngest boy. I wasn't sure where the screaming was coming from, but I ran to the boys' room and exploded through the door and turned the light on. Logan, who was my other son, woke up in a panic and Luke was missing. The bedroom window was wide open. I asked Logan where he was and he said he had no idea. I told Logan to run to Mom in our room and to let her know that Luke was missing and to call the police. I grabbed my 9mm handgun and I rushed outside and ran to my backyard, calling out for Luke's name, and thankfully he was able to let out a scream. We live out in the country and we have a huge yard that sits on about 15 acres of mostly dense woods and trails. I followed the sound of his scream and it led me to the woods. I found myself chasing after him, just trying my absolute best to find him. I screamed and screamed for him, but eventually he stopped screaming back. That's when my panic really set in, and I swear to you, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I kept searching for him, and after a few minutes, I heard something that sounded like a person stepping through sticks and leaves. And then I heard a sound of what sounded like someone taking a big gasp and trying to hold their breath. I looked all around me and I turned the flashlight on. I didn't have it on up until this point because I didn't want to give off my position. I knew my son was out there with someone who was trying to kidnap him. And I knew that I knew my woods better than anybody, and I knew he was still out there and that they were close by. I must have did a 360 4 or 5 different times, looking all around, until I finally spotted what looked like to be someone laying on the ground. All I could see was a shadow. Almost as soon as I pointed the flashlight at it and took a few steps closer, I then saw in fact that it was a man. He was lying on top of my son and he was suffocating him. The man ran off and I ran to my son Luke. He was lying there borderline unconscious and I picked him up and ran home and got him inside. The police were already there by the time we got back to the house and Luke had to go to the hospital. He turned out to be okay, but he had bruises all over his body and scratches on his neck and face. My son almost and very well could have died from asphyxiation. As for the man who kidnapped him, they never caught him. I gave the police the best description of him, but he's still out there somewhere. He was lucky I didn't shoot him in the fucking head. Sometimes I wish I would've. Luke said he thought the man was me and that he was dressed up with a ski mask and somehow the man convinced him to unlock the window and to go with him. My son is probably going to remember this for the rest of his life. I know my wife and I will.